video going here. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Nina Farrell. I am the manager of events and social media for the Alumni Association. Thank you again for joining us this evening. I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about who we, the Alumni Association, are, and some information about our guest speaker today. So the Alumni Association of the City College of New York is a 170-year-old membership-based independent organization. We operate here on the campus of the City College of New York, and we function on the behalf of the alumni in support of students and the college overall. We were founded by the first graduating class in 1853, and we just want to establish beneficial relationships between the college, alumni, and students, faculty, staff. We have about 10 chapters nationwide and 15 affiliate groups. And so this evening, we're going to hear from one of the many graduates of the City College of New York, Miss Kimberly Hamilton. She is the founder of Be Worth Finance, the author of Building Wealth on a Dime, a certified financial education instructor, and she currently teaches women, particularly young women, about dealing with their finances. Her advice has been featured in major publications such as Forbes and Business Insider, and she has led workshops for partners like Capital One Cafe and the United Women in Business Foundation. This evening, we're going to share not only her book. We're going to do a giveaway for one book this evening. We're also going to share her contact information in case any of you would like to continue to reach out to her on social media. So without further ado, I give you Kimberly Hamilton.
Thank you, Nina, for that introduction, and hello to everyone joining us tonight. I'm really excited to be here. As Nina said, I'm a City College alumna myself from class of 2010, so I'm really excited to circle back to this community and teach you all a little bit of the information that's included in my book, Building Wealth on a Dime. So I'm going to dive right into it here. Nina already gave a really nice introduction on myself, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide here. But as she mentioned, I'm a certified financial education instructor, so I love teaching people about money. That's what that certification really provides. Separate from my work with Be Worth Finance, which is a company I founded in 2019, I'm also the manager of financial education at Rocket Money, which is a personal finance app some of you might have heard of. And so excited to be here and speak with you all. And I think one of the reasons I'm most passionate about talking about this topic is because regardless of how old we are or our backgrounds, I think a lot of people can feel some of these emotions when it comes to thinking about money, how to make it grow, how to pay down debt, whether it's overwhelmed or anxious or just a general sort of state of confusion. It's something that unfortunately a lot of us don't grow up learning about. And so that can really carry on to adulthood as well. So I think it's a really important topic that we all sort of wish we knew more about, and I'm excited to speak about it today. And while we're at it, I asked a question in the chat. Feel free to share in the chat the year that you graduated City College and the best piece of money advice you've ever received. I see a few great examples in there already, so thanks for sharing that. The silver lining to sort of these emotions that a lot of people feel when it comes to money is that there are opportunities all around us to learn more about how personal finance and money management works, and also take advantage of savings and investment opportunities that really weren't there even just a few generations ago. Nina mentioned that a lot of the work I do focus specifically on women. That's especially true for us. regulations and technology have advanced to a point where it's a lot easier for people, and there are protections in place for a lot of different demographics to learn and really act on investment opportunities. So I'm not going to focus just on investing today. We're going to be talking about budgeting as well, but wanted to really highlight that it's not such a dire situation just because there's room to learn. There's also a lot of opportunities to take advantage of as well. And so here's some of what we're going to be covering today. The first is how to simplify your budget to reduce financial stress. I'm a big fan of automation. I talk about it a lot in my book, and I've found, in addition to my book, I also do one-on-one coaching and have online courses related to money management. And I've found from previous students and working one-on-one with clients that simplifying your budget and automating as much of it not only reduces financial stress because it decreases that burden of having to make sure, you know, that you've paid your bills, that your spending's on track, but it also makes it a lot easier to reach your financial goals over time because you're able to stay more consistent towards those contributions, whatever those goals may be, right? Whether that's paying down debt or increasing savings, investing for retirement, and so forth. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. The next thing I find people usually struggle with is how to prioritize their goals, because most people don't have just one, right? We're not just saving or just investing for retirement. There's a lot of places that our money needs to go over the course of our life. So I'll provide some quick tips there and how I recommend prioritizing those goals across a variety of things. And of course, some of you might have goals that are unique to yourselves as well. I already mentioned I'm a big fan of automating your finances, so I'll quickly go over some of your options there. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to focus on how you can utilize what's called tax advantaged accounts. These are certain investment vehicles that allow you to build wealth faster because of tax benefits that they provide, or tax savings they provide along your financial journey. So I'll cover exactly how you can go about doing that in terms of how you might order those accounts. And if we have time, maybe some investments to consider as well. Just a quick note, I'm reading over the chat. I'm really enjoying some of your responses. Melissa, treat your credit card as a debit card. I think that's really closely tied to, you know, if you don't, try not to spend on a credit card money that you don't have to pay down immediately. So I love that. Paying off high interest debt, and spending less than you make from Alan, absolutely. All great tips in there. So thank you for sharing that. But in addition to some of the things that we're going to go over in the presentation, I'll also be weaving in some of my $1 million habits from my book. I've listed 6 of them here. The $1 million habits in my book are things that I attribute regardless from any amount of debt I've ever paid down or any income I've earned. These are the things that I think have really contributed to my ability to accelerate my net worth over time. And so I wanted to just quickly preview them here. You'll hear me refer to them throughout the presentation, but obviously you'll have to get my book to learn the ins and outs, but just some of those sort of mantras, if you will, to follow when it comes to financial education. So starting off here, in terms of simplifying your budget, there's a system that I talk about in my book called the Money Move system, and it's a way not only to organize your finances, but to automate transfers between different accounts and payments you need to make to, again, reduce financial stress. And so I'll have some visuals in just a moment that I think do a good job of explaining how the system works. But just before we get there, the basis, your budget's going to be split into 4 categories. The first is going to be your take-home pay. That's pretty self-explanatory. That's the money that's actually hitting your checking account. Or if you're getting paid in cash or still cashing in checks or whatever, that's the amount of money that you're taking home every month. And I recommend setting up this budget on a monthly basis. The second category would be your fixed expenses. These are expenses that aren't changing month to month for the most part. So things like your mortgage payment or rent payment, any subscription services, utilities, phone bills, things like that. And I know that utilities do vary from month to month slightly, but sort of thinking broad strokes, the things that stay the same every month are going to go into that category. The third category would be your money goals or financial goals. So these includes things like savings, debt pay down, investment goals, and also something that are referred to as sinking funds. These are funds that you're going to contribute to throughout the year, knowing that you're going to be pulling through those funds for recurring but not monthly expenses. So a good example of a sinking fund might be a tax payment, insurance payments, or a vacation fund is a great example. Something that you want to be saving for on a monthly basis, again, to stay consistent, but that you know you're going to be pulling from that account to essentially pay yourself back once that expense is withdrawn. And the last category would be variable expenses. This is everything that changes month to month, including things like groceries and transportation when you're talking about money for gas, for example. Anything that changes month to month there is going to go in that last category. And you'll see in just a minute, when you set everything up together, you're actually going to be left with a spending cap so that you know, once you've already taken care of all your fixed expenses for the month, all your money goals for the month, you'll have this monthly spending cap. And if you divide that by 4.3, that'll actually leave you with a weekly spending cap that makes it a lot simpler to manage your money. And so this is a visual of what that looks like. The example on the left is actually taken from my book. For those of you that don't know, Building Wealth on a Dime is actually, it was really important for me to make it a story about people. So it's not just a money book where it has all this jargon about, compound interest and asset diversification and things like that, although that's included in there too. But I really wanted to make it about people to make it more relatable to the everyday person. So it actually follows 5 money makers, I call them, just like you all. It includes their budgets, their finances. What do their relationships look like? What are the emotions they're experiencing as they're trying to overcome different challenges, and how that relates to money? So the example that's on this slide on the left actually is from the example of a gentleman named Eric who lives in Portland in the book. And this is how his budget breaks down into these 4 buckets. So you could imagine if he's making $3,277 a month and his fixed expenses added up to $1,256, his money goals, and we'll get into what type of goals you might include and how to prioritize those in just a second, were $700, then he would have $1,321 left for his variable expenses. That's anything that's flexible, that changes month to month. So transportation, groceries, entertainment, shopping. And then if you divide by 4.3, that would give him his weekly spending cap. The beauty of the system, I think, and what I've heard back from clients over the years working in personal finance, is that this spending cap really provides a sense of comfort, almost knowing that if they can just stick to that week to week, that they're already taking care of these other things that are really, really important, right? Your fixed expenses are, a lot of that's wrapped up in necessities, and then money goals are also really important, things like debt pay down, saving, and investment. So that's just an example of how that worked out. The visual on the right is actually how someone might automate those expenses, but I'm going to circle back to that in just a bit after we talk through some of the money goals that you might want to consider. So there are actually quite a few different types of money goals. And again, you all may have some unique specific saving goals for yourself as well, whether that's saving for a home, maybe you need a new car, what have you. But broad strokes, these are sort of the 5 different types of goals that I recommend clients and you all think about. Things like debt pay down. This is especially true when it comes to any high interest debt. High interest debt definitely includes credit cards, but it's usually anything that has an interest rate of over around 8% or so. You're going to want to try and pay that down more quickly because that interest rate, the way compound interest works is that if you don't pay it down in full with a credit card, then you're paying more in interest over time. The quicker you can pay that down, the more money you save in interest that you can then attribute towards other goals. And the reason I say anything higher or lower than 8% is because that 8% interest rate then becomes comparable to what you could be getting in a conservative estimate for a rate of return when it comes to investing. So you want to pay down that high interest debt first so that you can reallocate that money towards another goal later. Specific savings goals, again, that's going to be unique to you. And those tend to be one-off savings goals. So things that you're not doing all the time. like a car, like a home, big purchases, things like that. Sinking funds, I mentioned this earlier. These are going to be funds that you set up specifically for something that you know you're going to have to pay throughout the year. So insurance premiums, tax payments, vacation funds. I have a sinking fund just for gifts throughout the year that pop up, like birthday gifts and wedding gifts. And then of course you have investing for retirement and maybe investing for some other goals. I know there was a quick survey that went out with the RS with registering for this event. And some of you did note that you're actually looking to invest for something that's not retirement. So that's interesting. And I also wanted to point out this 3.7% on the right, something that's actually a silver lining to inflation right now. For those of you that aren't familiar with that term, inflation essentially means the increased price of goods and services. It's been all over the news lately this past year. It really skyrocketed a bit there compared to year-over-year growth. And so inflation is really hurting a lot of Americans' pockets because it's costing more to do basic things like purchase gas, or you might have noticed your grocery bills have gone up. The one silver lining to that is that the interest rate for savings accounts, specifically high yield savings accounts, has also gone up as a result of something called the benchmark interest rate. So what that means is right now, there are lots of financial providers offering up to 3.75% interest rates on savings accounts. That is huge. That's almost 400 times what you're likely to get in a savings account from some of the big brick and mortar banks, if you will. So compared to Citibank or Chase, who are likely only offering maybe 0.01% on your savings, 3.75% is a huge jump. So I encourage you to check some of those out. I'm happy to provide, maybe we can send a follow-up email after this, Nina and David, with some recommendations there as well. But high yield savings accounts are usually come in the form of online banks. So some brick and mortar banks, Capital One being one off the top of my head, are offering these types of rates as well. It's not a certificate of deposit. For those of you that are familiar with that term, you can deposit and withdraw usually as you please. So definitely make use of those for your separate savings accounts if that's a goal of yours. And then in terms of prioritizing some of those goals, these are generally sort of the order of operations, if you will, that I recommend. So emergency fund first and foremost, that's really, really important. And ideally, you really want that to provide for anywhere between 3 to 6 months of living expenses. But if you're really just getting started, I recommend an initial goal of $1,000 for an emergency fund. What that's going to do is not just help you in case of an emergency, if you need a car repair or a dental surgery, who knows. The real thing that an emergency fund provides is it prevents you from going into debt. So at least $1,000, slowly working your way up to a few months of living expenses would be ideal there. Once you have that, at least that $1,000, the second thing I'd like you to do is meet your employer match in your 401k or your employer sponsored retirement plan. There's quite a few different versions of these. So a 401k, a 403b, a thrift savings plan. All of those are different types of tax advantaged, and we'll get into exactly what that means in just a bit. Employer sponsored retirement accounts, and likely they'll come with something that's called an employer match. What this means is that up to a certain percentage of your income, which will vary from employer to employer, if you contribute a certain amount to your 401k, then your employer will also contribute funds as well. It's basically, think of it as free money on the table, right? So you want to make sure that you're at least doing everything you can to meet whatever that free match is, because that can really truly accelerate your ability to invest for retirement by years. Even a 1 year difference can make the difference of tens of thousands when it comes to retirement. So at least contributing up to that employer match. An example of what that might be is your employer might say, I'm going to match 100% of your contributions up to 4% of your income. So as long as you contribute up to 4% of your income in that scenario, your employer would also include that in your account. So it's an amazing benefit that I really want to underscore here. Past that, you want to take care of your sinking funds and your other goals. Definitely look out for any high interest debt. And I should say I have the note at the top, but if it wasn't clear, I'm assuming this assumes that you're meeting minimum payments across your debt. If anyone on the webinar tonight is really struggling to keep up with debt payments, I suggest you look into credit counseling. You can check that out with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, and they'll be able to set you up with a nonprofit provider to help there. But beyond that, any extra debt payments, again, to pay down that high interest debt quicker so you're not paying to borrow that money. Maxing out any individual retirement accounts. So this is separate from your 401k. You may have heard of an individual retirement account like a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. That's a different type of retirement vehicle. There's also big benefits to that. And you can actually have both of those at the same time. So you can have a 401k and you can have an IRA. And the reason I say contribute up to your employer match, there's likely a much further ceiling, a lot more that you can contribute to a 401k beyond that employer match, and you should. But the reason I say meet your employer match first and then open out your IRA is because it gives you just some more control there. You get to choose who your financial provider is, and there's some other benefits we'll get to in a minute. Once you've maxed out an IRA, which the contribution limit in 2023 is going to be $6,500 to that, then return back and work on maxing out your 401k. That's a reach goal for most people. In 2023, the maximum you can contribute to a 401k is $22,500. And then after that, you want to consider just the standard taxable brokerage account, investment account, and I'll get into the differences in just a bit. And please, I know this is a lot, so if anyone has any questions as we're going, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll try to monitor them. Nina will be monitoring them as well, and we'll also try and leave time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And then just a quick note on student loans, since I know this has been a hot topic forever, really, but especially over the past year or two with everything going on with student loan forgiveness. No major updates here, except that the Supreme Court's going to weigh in on the Biden administration's student loan debt relief on February 28th, so stay tuned. And then I did want to flag that until that litigation sort of reaches a resolution, or June 30th, 2023, while those payments on those loans are deferred, there is 0% interest. So if you're currently have student debt and you're thinking not all of that will get forgiven, then it may be in your best interest to consider making payments even though it's paused, because 100% of your payment right now is going to knock down that principal balance. So you'll pay a lot less in interest when they resume. And you could pay down your debt quicker. So it's something to consider, and just wanted to make a quick note on that. I see a question in the chat. Can you take your funds from your 401k if you leave to another job, or transfer them to your next job? Great question, Melissa, in the chat. So, excuse me. So to answer your question, the funds that you contribute to your 401k are always yours. So they'll never be like taken from your provider, by your employer or from your provider. You're investing with those funds. So a lot of people say saving for retirement, but most people are investing. So there's always some risk with that. The market goes up and down. So it's not to say that there's no potential to lose money, but the chances, and I'll get into some of the statistics a little bit later, that your money grows are well in your favor. And over time, when we're talking about long-term investing. So over 10, 20, 30 years, you invest money in that 401k and it grows over time. If you transfer jobs, you can usually keep it with that financial provider, or you have the option of rolling it over to maybe your new employer or an individual retirement account, but those funds are always yours. What's not always yours is the employer match portion. So what you put in, you keep, but if your employer is matching those funds, whether or not you get to keep that portion depends on what's called a vesting schedule. And what that vesting schedule is it determines based on how long you work at a company, or a nonprofit, what have you, how much of those you get to keep. So a common vesting schedule that I hear often is 25% per year. That means if you were to leave your job after year one, you would take 100% of whatever you put in and the growth in that account. That would always be yours, but you would only have 25% of what your employer put in. So what you would contribute to your 401k is always in your own ownership. What the employer contributes depends on a vesting schedule, and that'll vary employer to employer. So now that we have some of the goals worked out, I wanted to just quickly focus again on that automation piece. I find that this again goes great lengths to reduce financial stress because you're not spending so much time thinking about, did I pay that bill? It's not as sporadic if you're able to automate as much as that. So just some ways here that I wanted to highlight that you're able to do this. Most companies and banks for that matter have the ability to set up automatic bill pay, so you can do that for things like utilities, a phone bill, any subscription services, using services like direct transfers, or sometimes even your employer can split your paycheck to one or multiple accounts. So one example, you might decide to have a certain amount go to your checking and another amount go to a specific savings account is another way you can do that. Automatic loan payments for federal loans. And I should have caveated that earlier. The Biden administration's current student debt relief plan is for federal loans only, not private loans. So that's important to keep in mind. But for federal student loans, they'll actually usually give you a small discount on interest for setting up automatic payments there. And then I'm also a big fan of using personal finance apps to track spending and payments. Full disclosure here, I think I mentioned earlier, but I'm the senior manager of financial education for Rocket Money, so that's one you might consider. There are others, so if you want to check out some of my favorite apps and tools, even brokerage providers, you can do that at beworthfinance.com/favorites, and I included that link there as well. So definitely recommend if you're comfortable with it or if you haven't tried it, automating as much as possible. And then just one tip, if you're concerned about the use of those automatic transfers, if you're concerned about any overdraft, consider keeping, a buffer in your checking account just to make sure, or set up a balance alert to prevent that from happening. Then I mentioned earlier, I would circle back to this graphic on the right here, just one example of how if someone was paid monthly or even biweekly, how they might automate their finances using that structure. So you can imagine you're getting paid, that's going to your checking account, automating any payments you can related to your fixed expenses here on the left, then your money goals here on the right. So using automatic transfers or bill payments to pay down credit cards and save and invest and things like that. And then you're left with your variable spending. How you want to track that variable spending cap is completely up to you. I have some clients that, even if they're not comfortable with using technology like the personal finance apps, they can do it through their bank or using spreadsheets. Some clients just will monitor, if they use the same credit card, then they'll monitor their variable spending that way. And again, you want to pay that down in full every month if possible. So there are a few ways to do it. But find that separating these buckets and automating as much as possible can make your life a lot easier and more likely that you're going to reach those goals by knowing exactly how much you're contributing to those on a monthly basis. And so the last sort of topic that I want to cover, but it's a little bit of a hefty one, is the importance of investing as early and as often as possible. I know I'm talking to an alumni group here, so we might have a variety of ages on the call, which I also think is really exciting because we all have, something to learn all the time. But quick guess in the chat. I'm going to use this question here to sort of underscore the importance of investing sooner rather than later, if you will. It's the $1 Million Habit number 6 in my book. The earlier you start investing, the harder your money's going to work for you. Even a year can make a huge difference when it comes to your retirement when later in life. So if you had to take a guess, if you took one penny and you doubled its value over time for 30 days, how much would it be worth in that 30 days? I'm hoping to get a guess or two in the chat. So I'll wait to see an answer or two pour in, or if anyone, I don't know if I have the ability to unmute, but if anyone wants to guess in the chat. $15. Thank you, Edlin. Anyone else? It took a penny and you doubled its value every day for 30 days. $6 million. So quite a range there. Thank you, Lloyd, for that guess. Any last guesses? 1.73 million. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for guessing. It's a tough one. I'm not going to lie. And generally, generally the numbers are a little bit all over the place, so the responses aren't surprising. But to give you an example of what it would actually be, believe it or not, the amount is 5.3 million. And the reason I give this example is because when you're talking about paying down debt, loans, credit cards, things like that, I mentioned earlier, compound interest works against you because it's building on top of the money you already borrowed, which means you're paying more over time. But when you're investing or you're saving, compound interest actually works in your favor. It means that it's going to allow your wealth to build faster and faster over time and exponentially over time, meaning the rate that it's growing is sort of an upward swing like this. And so I think this example really, really illustrates that. Now, to be absolutely clear, if you were doubling an investment day after day, that would be a daily 100% rate of return. That does not exist. If anyone tells you it does, do not believe them. We're not talking about a get rich quick scheme here. But what this does do is underscore just how investing and the concept of compound interest can grow your investments over time. So thank you for everyone that provided a few answers there. Now this is more of a realistic example, and I mentioned starting as early as possible really makes a difference, and here's just a quick image that I thought helped illustrate that really well. So in this example, Jack, Jill, and Joey are all investing the same amount per month, but they're starting 10 years apart. And you can see by starting earlier just how much more in this example that Jack is able to have his portfolio grow than Jill over time just by starting 10 years earlier. And I will say, I don't think I have the example in here, but even just a year earlier can really make a difference. So even if you're starting, you can invest with as little as like $5 or $20 these days. You don't have to have a whole bunch of money to get started. I think that's a really common misconception. So getting started as soon as you can, even with it's a small amount, that's okay. In fact, the $1 Million Habit, #1 in my book is start small, dream big, right? Start with whatever you have to pay down your debt, to save more, to invest where you can, try to do it strategically, and you're likely to be much better off in the long run. So I thought that would be a helpful example here. The other thing about investing is it can be intimidating to a lot of people, regardless of your age. And I think part of that reason is there's a lot of terminology, and also culturally, it's just sort of, you see it in movies growing up that it's that the people investing or, seem like they already have money, but that's not necessary in order for everyone to get started. And I find when I talk to clients about it, that it's actually a lot like learning a new language, right? If you're learning a language when you're younger, it's a lot less intimidating. It's easier to learn the younger you start. It's easier to speak another language the earlier you start. But once you start, it gets a little bit less complicated day by day. And so I like to think of investing like that as well. In my book, I take terms that I think tend to be really complicated, like asset allocation and diversification, and I break them down and compare them to ordering tacos at your favorite, brand new Mexican restaurant. There are ways to explain things that don't have to be so complicated. And so I encourage everyone, even though it might be a little intimidating to learn more, to do your best and try to invest as much and as early as you can, as often as you can moving forward. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir here because you all showed up today. So obviously you're interested in learning. Another few stats I like to share just for those that might be intimidated to start investing or to invest more aggressively based on the survey that came through on the RSVP. I was very happy to see that a lot of you are investing already, but a lot of you are not what's called maxing out tax advantage accounts. So again, that's reaching the maximum limits that you can on tax advantage vehicles like a 401k, like an IRA. Together, those add up to thousands of dollars and $28,500. So it's a reach goal for a lot of people. But if you can, some people might be hesitant, especially now because you hear things in the media that talk about, a recession might be coming and all of these things that are really hard to predict. The market is cyclical, it goes like this. So there's always going to be ups and downs. But just some statistics here that might help quell some of those fears. 6% is the lowest average rate of the stock market's return. That's measured by the S&P 500 when adjusted for inflation over any 30-year period in US history. So when you're talking about investing for the long term, that's anything in that ballpark is really reasonable to expect. Usually the annual returns are going, I shouldn't say usually, but without adjusted for inflation, those returns are higher. But again, when adjusting for that increased price of goods and services over time, the average is 6%. That's more than you're going to get in any savings account in a bank, as if you're just saving your money. So that's part of the reason why it's important to invest, and you can get rates of return significantly higher than that over time. 11 months is the average recovery time from a recession since the 1950s. So everyone, if you're worried about what the stock market's doing right now, or maybe you're getting closer to retirement, know that the bounce back period is usually relatively quick there. And then the average length of a market correction, that's a decline of 10%, but not more than 20% since 1990 has been 54 days. And then now, so you're excited to invest, or maybe you want to invest more. What tools do you have at your disposal to do that? I should say I'll be talking about first the different types of tax advantage vehicles that you have. Keep in mind that these vehicles are separate from the actual investments that you might be making within them. So again, going back to a restaurant example, you might bring your money to the restaurant. The account is the restaurant, but you still have to order something, right? You still have to order the tacos or the burger or whatever you want. So you could think of that as actually choosing those investments. So here we're just talking about the types of accounts themselves. And the first two you'll see on the left are different types of employer-sponsored accounts. So you have a 401k that's usually going to be with a private employer, 403b for nonprofits, 457s and thrift savings plans. Those are actually two different types of accounts there, depending on whether you work for the federal government or state or local government, are all going to be employer-sponsored tax advantage investment vehicles. And when I say tax advantage investment vehicle, that's basically a type of investment account that provides some form of tax benefit. And they might differ. We're going to go through a few here in just a minute. But those tax savings allow you to build wealth quicker. And that's one reason to take, the big reason to take advantage of tax advantage vehicles before opening what's called a taxable brokerage account, which might be just a Vanguard account, or lots of mobile app related investing accounts tend to be taxable brokerage accounts as well. You're going to pay more taxes in those. There are some benefits. For example, when using tax advantage accounts, you're usually restricted to when you can withdraw that money until you reach age 59 and a half in many cases. except for one, which we'll get to in just a bit. But with the taxable brokerage account, while you can withdraw those funds at any point, you'll be paying higher taxes. So when we're talking for retirement and building wealth, you want to invest for the long term. And ideally, you want to invest using these types of accounts before opening a taxable brokerage account. And here's just a quick chart to sort of outline some of those differences in terms of when you're taxed. So if you see the American flag and the money flying away, that's a taxable event. And so this is just a quick chart to compare the difference between tax advantage and taxable accounts. So when we're talking about this first row, a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k, you're not taxed when you put the money in the account or while your money grows. This part's huge, right? Because again, we're thinking long term, but when you withdraw those funds in retirement, you're taxed at that point. That's very different from a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA, where you pay taxes on the money that you're contributing to that account with. Similar to traditional version, you're not taxed as that money grows, but you're also not taxed in retirement. So making the decision between a traditional and Roth IRA, for example, depends on when you'd want to be taxed and usually depends on your tax bracket. An HSA, a health savings account, that's usually associated in most people's minds with health insurance, but it also has an investment vehicle to it and tax advantages to it as well. And that when you put money in an HSA, that's not taxed. The money in there gets to grow tax-free. And then withdrawing is sort of a misnomer here, but you can actually use that money towards medical expenses tax-free as well. So it's actually the most tax beneficial account of them all. The contribution limits are significantly smaller, under 4,000 compared to 6,500 and 22,500 for, sorry, this is for that first one, the 6,500 is for a Roth or traditional IRA, and then the 22,500 contribution limit is going to be for those employer sponsored accounts. All that's compared to a taxable account where you're taxed at all three events. So you're paying income taxes on the money that you're putting into an account, because if you're getting paid, you're paying taxes on that, and then you're using to invest that. You pay taxes when you file your taxes any year on any dividends earned, and then you're also taxed when you're withdrawing those earnings. So that's why you want to prioritize those tax advantage accounts when you can. And here's sort of the full listing of the different tax advantage vehicles to you. So if any of these sound familiar related to your employer benefits, or you want to do some research on those available to you, I encourage you to do that. The benefits, again, whether you're contributing with pre-tax money or post-tax vary, and how much you can contribute to those accounts vary. But if you had to take one thing away from this point in the presentation, it would be to make use of these accounts before investing in a taxable brokerage account so that your money has more of an ability to grow. And I should say this is not, I have the asterisk here, you can actually contribute more if you're age 50 or older to these accounts. You're allowed what's called catch-up contributions there as you're getting closer to retirement, so that's important to keep in mind. I see it's 6:47, so I think I'm going to run through these next few slides very quickly. We already sort of spoke about this in the goals related slide about meeting your employer match, maxing out an individual retirement account, returning to your employer sponsored account before opening a brokerage account. So that's just my recommendation here. I think the one caveat to that is if you were investing for a goal like buying a house, for example, and you were comfortable with the ups and downs of the market and investing for that goal, then that might be one reason to use a taxable brokerage account, because you won't face any penalties for withdrawing before age 59 and a half. You can withdraw at any point, but you would pay taxes on that. So that would be the one caveat. I'm going to run through the rest of these because I'm very excited about the book giveaway that we have going on. So just a quick recap here, some of the things I covered during the presentation. how to calculate that weekly spending cap. And again, the reason you would divide that variable spending category by 4.3 and not 4 is because not every month has a straight 4 weeks in it, right? Some have a little bit more. So you divide by 4.3 to get that variable spending cap. We spoke about different ways you can prioritize your goals, the importance of automating your finances to reduce financial stress. Big proponent of investing as early and as often as possible. And if you're starting later, that's okay too. There's some characters in my book that are learning to invest, later in life. And the book walks through strategies that they can use to make the best of the timeline they have given on when they started. But if you can do earlier, that's definitely recommended, and how to optimize your use tax advantage accounts to be a little bit more strategic in doing that. I know we're going to go to the book giveaway. So before we do the Q&A, so maybe I'll just leave this up here and pass it back to you for a bit, Nina. But if you want to learn more about any of the things I spoke about today, not just investing, strategies related to debt pay down and how you can tackle debt sooner, improving your credit, budgeting strategies. There's 3 chapters on the book on home ownership and real estate investment, including one of my favorite chapters, which is Confessions of a First-Time Homebuyer, which actually follows my own story. If you want to learn a little bit more about me in the book, my first condo turned rental property now. How to create generational wealth, which is something you can do even if you don't have kids. Think about other members of your family, and more. So you can get all of that in the book, and there's a link there as to where you can find it. It's sold on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, and you could also find it in your local bookstore if you prefer to support an independent bookstore, but all of those will be compiled on that website I have there. I'm going to throw that link in the chat, but Nina, I'll pass it back to you because I know we're doing a giveaway and I'm excited to see who the lucky winner might be.
Hi, thank you. Let's see if my camera will work here. Okay, so it looks like through our random selection here of numbers, Mr. Bob Cheeks, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Bob Cheeks, it is the winner, the lucky winner of the book giveaway.
All right, do we have Bob on at the moment?
Yes, he's here.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Did I pronounce
How
your
are
name
you?
right?
Pardon me?
I said, did I pronounce your name right?
No,
Oh,
it doesn't matter. It's Chaikas. We pronounce it Chaikas, but we're the only ones in the world, so don't feel bad.
I'm sorry. Well, congratulations. You have won Kimberly's book, Building Wealth on a Dime.
Oh, terrific. Thank you.
So I'll contact you directly in the chat to get your information.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was I thought it was an excellent presentation, a very, very clear, presentation on what you have to do to survive in this economic world.
Thank you, Bob. Well, I hope you enjoyed the book, and Nina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we'll have some swag in there as well, some City College
yes, that is
memorabilia,
correct.
which should be fun.
Thank you.
You're
Great.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Got it. And Nina, was that it?
Yes, that is all.
Okay, great.
You're going to do question and answering now, correct?
I am. And also, I'll advance the slide here, just some places you can find me, my email. I'm all over social media, mostly most active on Instagram, and my website as well. If you may be interested or know somebody else that might be interested in not just my book, but the other services I offer. I have some online courses that are completely on demand and one-on-one coaching. But with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions, and thank you everyone that was able to attend today.
And unmute yourselves if you have a question.
Or put it in the chat if you're shy or maybe chowing down on dinner already. I know it's about that time for everyone.
Thank you, Kimberly. Do you hear me? Does everyone hear me?
I do. Hi, Carol.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful, clear, organized presentation, and you covered a lot of ground succinctly. I don't know if you get into this, but right now I'm thinking of sort of tax-free investments, and I read about treasury notes tips. I don't know if you want to get into that or if it's in your book, but I'm just curious about.
Yeah, I don't cover that specifically in the book. I think one of it's sort of another silver lining, similar to how I mentioned about the savings rates for high yield savings accounts increasing. That's coming as a result of the benchmark interest rate increasing for the federal government. Another silver lining of that is that some bonds have become sort of they've bounced back, if you will. For a while, you know, bonds were really popular, and then sort of the returns that they were offering wasn't as beneficial. But right now, while the market's not doing so great, they've become more advantageous to people. I bonds specifically have had a very high return offering lately. So it's definitely, I definitely recommend exploring that, especially for those that are closer to retirement. And so you really want a more guaranteed rate there, if you will, or something that's a little bit less volatile.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So, Kimberly, this is Bob Chikas again. I could offer some advice to Carol about purchasing treasury bills, because I've purchased them. It's easy to do them over the internet. Okay, there's a website called treasurydirect.gov, G-O-V. Okay, and you can purchase, you know, treasury bills directly, treasury securities directly over the internet. You just have to create an account. And right now, the 1-year treasury bills are paying, you know, probably maybe even a little bit more, you know, than the high yield savings accounts, because they're also 1-year treasury bills are tax-free state-wise, not federal, but state-wise. So so right now, you know, they're really not a bad investment. And like I said, it's easy to create your own account and purchase them over the internet yourself without a brokerage fee or anything, you know, on treasurydirect.gov.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful, Bob. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob. I threw that link in the chat also. Fantastic. And thank you for your question, Carol.
You're
Any
welcome.
others? Going once, going twice. Alrighty, well, let's see. One more in the chat. How early is too early to start a retirement fund, especially if you're working freelance? Thank you for this question. It is never too early. When people ask me what my number one regret is, if you will, and I don't have many of them, and I don't know if it's a true regret because I just didn't know at the time, but I wish I had started, and I've been working since I was 16 years old, and I could have opened an individual retirement account the second I turned 18, and I wish I had. I didn't start investing until my early 20s, and aggressively until, you know, even my mid 20s. I'm 35 now, so it's never too early to get started. If you're working freelance, you're not going to have the option for those employer sponsored accounts I was talking about, like the 401k or 403b, but an individual retirement account is something that you can consider. So a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA are two common types of tax advantage vehicles for individuals, and you sort of control how much you contribute. You get to pick who your financial provider is for that. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at those, a traditional or a Roth IRA. If you happen, there are other options for those that might have a small business or be a sole proprietor, you can look into what's called a simple employee pension IRA, a SEP IRA, a solo 401k, or a simple IRA. Simple is an acronym as well. That's I'm not going to be able to recall accurately off of the top of my head, but I do cover all of those in my book, especially as someone that's, you know, started a small business of my own, that you can make higher contributions to some of those accounts than you can to a traditional or Roth IRA. So if you have a small business, consider those, but even if you're just a freelancer, you know, a contractor, 1099, then definitely consider the traditional or Roth IRA as well. Never too early, as even if you're only starting with, like, I'm serious, like if you're starting with like the $10, $20, do it. Just get in the habit, start flexing that muscle so it becomes something that you're less intimidated by and get more comfortable with over time. Any last questions?
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you for this presentation. I just wanted I wanted to ask if you could just expand a little bit more on the Roth IRA, as far as like benefits, and then contributing, you know, after tax dollars and just like tax benefits.
Sure. And I know let me just say thank you to everyone that's attending, because I know this is going to take us a few minutes over if people have to jump, but I'm happy to answer your question. So the Roth IRA and the traditional IRA are two of the more common types of IRAs that you're going to see out there. The contribution limit for both of those is $6,500 for 2023 that you can contribute. The main thing to consider, well, there are two when choosing between a traditional and a Roth IRA, is what you think your tax bracket might be in the future. So if you think you're going to be making more money and have a higher tax bracket in retirement, then you might prefer to pay taxes now, because you would be taxed more later, right? So in that vein, you would go for a Roth IRA because you're contributing with funds that you pay taxes on now, but then your money grows and you're not taxed in retirement. If you thought that you might be in a lower tax bracket in retirement, then you might prefer to pay those later with a traditional IRA. So those that tend to be earlier in their careers tend to choose a Roth IRA, but Roth IRA is actually my favorite type of tax advantage vehicle. And one of the reasons is I just don't want to have to worry about the math later. Like, just knowing what I have in there, I can withdraw without penalty, without taxes in retirement. Emotionally, I think has a huge
Otherwise, there's
benefit
no
there.
show.
Oh, David, it looks like you came off mute there. And then the other thing, just to answer your question, another benefit of a Roth IRA is, as long as you've had the account for 5 years, you can withdraw anything you've contributed. So not the earnings, not the growth that you've experienced, but anything that you've contributed, you can withdraw penalty and tax-free. That's a huge benefit, because with the traditional IRA, if you withdraw before age 59 and a half, in addition to taxes that you'll pay, you're going to face a 10% penalty. So if you think you might need access for those funds, anytime you're investing, I encourage long-term investing. So you want to try not to pull out those funds if you don't need to, but if there's an emergency, for example, and you needed access to those funds, you would be hit less. You wouldn't face a penalty in withdrawing those from a Roth IRA. So that's another big benefit there. Hopefully that helped a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much. That was really detailed. Thank you.
Great, you're welcome. Nina, thanks for all those links and throwing in the chat there as well, so people can follow along for more money tips. I think that's all the time we have left for questions, but thank you all. That was for everyone showing up today, your questions, your engagement. I really appreciate it. I really hope you check out the book. It's really a project of passion for me, and you know, I hope it's something that people can pass on to other learned ones as well, because everyone could always take a little bit more time to, I think, improve their relationship with money. And that's part of what all you all are doing and showing up today. So thank you for having me. And and enjoy the rest of your night. Nina, any last words
Yes,
before we
yes.
sign off?
Because we're limited in time, I put a lot of the information in the chat, which is basically, if you're not a member, please check out our website at ccnyalumni.org to get more information about events like this one this evening, and to get access to our membership or membership benefits. I also included our social media links as well as Ms. Hamilton's social media links in the chat. So again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Kimberly, for doing this. And hopefully we'll have something in the works for you all soon.
Thank you, everyone. And you're welcome.